Hi everybody, welcome to Monday. First and foremost, for the people who it really bugs when I change my background and don't say anything, I changed my background a bit. I took some stuff out, moved some stuff around. Second, I'm not going to do a boss fight update this video because this one's probably going to be a long one, but there will be one later in the week because I do have some updates. It's part of why the furniture's moved because I need the space for boss fight. But patrons do get regular boss fight updates. I love this part about Patreon, that I can do updates and the patrons keep me honest, and that's where all the transparency happens. And they've already got previews for boss fight episode 4. So if you want behind the scenes stuff like that, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. And in the spirit of transparency and honesty, this is actually a response to feedback on Friday. Not feedback Friday, feedback from Friday. And no, I will not sing. That's for Fridays. I will keep the impromptu singing on Twitch where it belongs. For people who haven't watched my Twitch content, I tend to do shitpost lyric cover tunes with alarming regularity. I don't know why it makes me play better. I'm weird. So, there were so many of a particular kind of response that I'm like, there's something here that needs to be responded to. Because enough people think this, that it needs to be addressed. And I'm going to have to preface a preface with a preface. I don't want anybody to feel like I'm criticizing their responses or attacking them. The fact that I am bringing this up means it is worthy of a response. This is not shooting down your idea. This is giving you another side to consider. One. Two. I had to kind of scrape myself off the wall after reading this. I admit, I felt kind of attacked by this particular line of stuff. And I'm saying that just as disclosure. I want to be honest with you guys because this gets into my point. What I eventually realized after I scraped myself off the wall, sat down, played some Satisfactory, built conveyor belts while I chilled and got past that, is I realized that that's the place everybody's coming from. In these discussions, everybody's feeling kicked in the gut. And what was the comment? I know, big lead up, but I want to do that preface. And I did that preface because I want to be clear that I don't know, because I can't mind read, but I think that these comments weren't intended to kick me in the gut. These comments are coming from people feeling kicked in the gut, aka traumatized. And what the nature of the comment was basically that, Leanna, nobody has a problem with the stuff you talk about. If this was what feminism in video games was, there'd be no problem. But feminists like you let in the bad feminists. You let them take over. And it was the you let them that kicked me in the gut, because I'm like, why do you guys think I had any control over it? Like, I've been sitting here going, hello, wait, problems since like at least 2012, more like 2010. I don't have any power over Kotaku and IGN and Polygon and all that stuff. Those guys who run those sites have been in gaming a long time. They were the type of guy who, when it was acceptable, circa like 2005, when any woman opened her mouth about games, you're a girl, what do you know? That's what it used to be like. Okay, that's what it used to be like. And the guys running gaming websites right now want to pretend like that wasn't them, but they're damn lucky that things like Twitter didn't capture that stuff back then. Because you think Ninja gets in trouble for what he says? Oh, Lord. And that's the thing. We didn't let anybody in because we had no power to let them in. I'll say this again. I know I said this before, but please listen to me this time. Those guys who are problems and make gamers everywhere look bad, they let in particular women. They decided that these women had something important to say and other women didn't, because those particular opinions voiced by women were more in line with what these guys already felt, which is, a permutation of, don't wear that revealing outfit. It's distracting. It's inherently demeaning. And they can claim it's different when a real world woman does it all they want. No, it ain't. Because the theories claiming that women dressing slutty is inherently bad come from the idea that real world women only dress that way because they see women in the media dressing that way. So they feel pressure to dress that way because male gaze. Now, I've talked at length about the problems with the male gaze. I'll do it again in case people are just seeing video for the first time. There are myriad problems with the male gaze. If I actually did a complete college course on gender in gaming, I would do an entire week on the male gaze and the problems with the theory. First of all, it was never intended to be a theory. It was a polemic written by Laura Mulvey. A polemic basically means it was a big, wordy, academic ease op-ed in a time during second wave feminism where women were basically going, we can use big words too, boys. Freshly college educated women were smacking people around with their degrees, right? But Laura Mulvey herself said it was a polemic. That means she got pissed off and wrote a hot take, okay? She was applying Lacanian gaze theory through psychology. Jacques Lacan being the psychologist in question. There's another root of gaze theory, also adapted by feminist thought, that doesn't get the same amount of play. And I actually think that one's more applicable if we actually follow it to its logical conclusion. Because the problem with this idea of a camera representing the comfort and desires of all men everywhere, I mean, the idea is absurd, right? There's just too much diversity of preference in men. There's too many divergent lived experiences, right? The act, especially when Laura Mulvey wrote about the male gaze, as Bell Hooks cited, that it still wasn't safe for black men to look at white women the way white men looked at white women. So, the civil rights movement was still going to an extent, right? Because it was the 70s. Civil rights movement's still going, but you know what I mean? That era of it. But so, according to Bell Hooks, black men would go to the movies, safely look at white women, go, yeah, she got no ass, but she's still pretty hot. That I added that, not Bell Hooks. And that matters. But even then it's different. And then you get gay men, and that's different too. Like, what a gay man wants to see on screen is very different than what a straight man wants to see on screen. I shouldn't have to explain why. Watch Queer Eye for the straight guy. Straight guy dressed like this. Queer guy dressed like this. There's a whole show about it. Not to stereotype, which it does, but you get the point. There is no single male gaze that Hollywood can. We know Hollywood has problems with diversity. The big problem with Hollywood and the gays depicted from Hollywood is not that it's male, it's that it's artificial. There is absolutely nothing wrong at targeting your media to men. The truth is, television isn't aimed at men anymore. It's aimed at women because household products. They've changed the idea of grabbing when they're young and stupid. Advertising shifted to mom in a family has an sort of amplified a greater influence over. If mom buys Dove soap, the kids, male and female alike, are more likely to buy Dove soap because that's what they grew up with. I just use the example of Dove soap because that's what I did. It's like mom bought Dove, all bought Dove. And one day I went, what am I doing this? And so I actually tried a few and it's like, no, I actually like the Dove body wash. Okay, I'll go back to Dove. But so TV is now aimed more at women, except for, premium cable, which like HBO doesn't run commercials, different story. Tech, men tend to be early adopters, so it becomes more male, and then, it slowly shifts because once they saturate men, then they want to attract more people. For whatever reason, they don't decide to attract everybody all at once except Disney. Disney has a formula down to a science to have something for everybody. It's brilliant and kind of evil at the same time. The people are that predictable and they figured out how, But that's the idea of the male gaze is absurd. And that was, the absurdity was part of Mulvey's point, is that she wasn't going to bother to prove it because you can't prove it, right? But the fact that people took it so seriously really said something, because yes, a small group of men in Hollywood were dictating what was beautiful and interesting for the rest of us. And at the time, Mulvey had a point, because New Hollywood Cinema, the serious film, it was catering to freshly college educated middle-class white men. Not women at the time, men. Obviously things have changed, but it was a snapshot in time. To be continuing to, act like nothing's changed and we still have this homogenous male gaze in a world where, there is porn of everything and it ain't all the same, it's absurd. But people keep applying it. And, I totally get why people go, this is fucked. This just isn't, I'm a man. I know what I like. What I see in media does not match my what is this? I get it. Okay. I get it. But when a sector of media is run by guys who are still running from a lot of internalized guilt because of shit they damn well know they did and continue to do in a lot of ways, those guys have a lot of awkwardness around women, and that has led to some, I'll say, funny ideas. And, people say, well, all gamers are like that. No, they're not. No, they're not. Gaming's just too big for you to be able to say anything about gamers in general. It's too diverse. It's too huge. The games media is still not very diverse, especially at the editorial level. And the problem is that those guys aren't going to give up power anytime soon, because there's nowhere for them to go. They are going to stay in those jobs until they get fired or they retire. And so management roles don't open up for women. I mean, hey, Polygon hired a woman to talk about movies and TV, not gaming, right? Not on the editorial level. And this matters, because those are the people that decide what ideas get let in. And, we can hope that these editors go, you know what, we don't have enough diversity of voice. We have to start getting people to come in, and we have to invite more diversity of views. Unfortunately, they've cultivated an audience that would rebel so hard against that probably isn't going to happen. What's going to happen is video games are going to continue to mainstream, which means more general purpose, media outlets, newspapers, TV shows, stuff like that cover other forms of entertainment. They're going to start doing more and more games coverage. Eventually, video games are going to be a regular thing, like books and TV and film and all that stuff, right? I mean, there's a shrinkage going on. There's a contraction going on in media right now with that. Everything's becoming like newswire content for that because media in general continues to shrink, but it'll stabilize. And what will eventually happen is that video games will become mainstream enough that, I mean, can you name a website that's, we only cover TV? We only cover movies. No, they tend to do a bunch of both. Gaming just hasn't hit there yet. It will. And when that happens, you'll actually start seeing the press coverage of this stuff change. Because once it becomes mainstream enough to have that happen, you're going to have people who live more in the real world. They don't get to have 20 years of estrogen-free, workplace spaces, only letting in the women that don't scare them. And if you're wondering, God, those women don't scare them? Well, no, because they know all the right answers. They've screened carefully, so they knew the right answers for the people they're hiring them. And this is why, right, they're okay with the idea that all media revolves around male comfort, because that's how they're making their decisions. They're making decisions based on their own comfort. And they just assume that every guy thinks the same way they do. And if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you're not like that. Because I bust your balls. It's just true, right? The fact that we can have these sort of asymmetrical conversations with an underpinning in respect indicates that's not what's going on here. You guys are willing to leave provocative comments, but they're not just a bunch of swears and nasty grams. There's a core of something valid enough for me to bother to talk about for 20 minutes, right? And that's good. And this is where I go back to this idea of trauma in video games. Because what I've watched for the last couple weeks / last 20 friggin' years. Yes, I've been in gaming that long. Not quite that long, but oh God, it's getting there. Oh my God. Whoa. But everybody feels like they're just being beat on. And all the bunch of people who don't have any real power are attacking other people that don't have any real power. And the people who actually do have any sort of influence are just sitting there small and quiet and hoping no one notices. And I mean, don't take my word for it. Look at the cries of anguish on the Twitter feeds of these allegedly powerful sex negative feminists, right? Do they seem empowered to you? That's not, nothing is enough for them. That's not an empowered place, okay? That's a wounded animal screaming when people constantly project victimhood. Nobody wants to hitch their wagon to that, you know? And we got to be careful when we talk about, nobody wants somebody polarizing, because art is polarizing, right? Like, no, you want people with firm creative visions who are willing to defend their creative visions. There's polarizing, which is good, because art challenges. And then there's, you just don't know what you're talking about and you're taking cheap shots. And I get that that's the stuff that people don't like. You have to be able to defend your views. And the interesting thing is that there's another form of gaze theory in feminist thought that for some odd reason got eclipsed by Laura Mulvey's polemic. Even though people name drop Simone de Beauvoir all the time, right? Mulvey was Lacanian gaze theory, which came through psychiatry. De Beauvoir used a different take on the gaze that she got from Jean-Paul Sartre. And what de Beauvoir talked about, because they were existentialists, right, is that a person can become so aware that they are constantly being watched, that it becomes something of an out-of-body experience. They split into two forms of consciousness. I'm paraphrasing some. But they start actively engaging in that idea of being the object of being watched all the time. And she talked about that was one of the things that drove her idea that, you know, women are the second sex, le deuxième sexe. That was the name of her groundbreaking book. Now, de Beauvoir had issues, okay? I'm not saying this is gospel. I'm not saying she's right. I'm saying this is the theory. But hear me out, because if you widen the frame just a little bit, it's a good underpinning for what's going on in gaming, right? What de Beauvoir basically said, which came through Sartre, is that when people get self-conscious enough about being observed, being watched, being judged, it changes their behavior. This is very similar to what's going on in gaming with all the, you know, alleged self-censorship, and then people fight about the word censorship. But it's like, stop fighting over words, guys. Like, look at this idea that it's deeper than that. People are changing their behavior because the glare of the gaze is so blinding. It's not that they are knowingly, nope, got to take this out. Nope, got to take this out. It is muted. Those impulses just, they subvert it. It's not there anymore. They don't create anything to cut it out. That's what censorship is, right? You write a joke, it gets censored. You write a scene, it gets censored. That scene never gets written. It's deeper. So, okay, sometimes it's censorship, right? The Senran Kagura stuff and stuff like that. You know what I mean, though, right? And this is what de Beauvoir talked about happening to women, not so much men, which is very interesting coming from a woman who would not call herself a philosopher. That was Sartre. De Beauvoir was a student of Sartre. Yes, she referred to herself in the third person, the woman that says that people split from, you know, obviously she was being very honest about her own experience, but she also slept with her students in threesomes with Jean-Paul Sartre. So de Beauvoir is a sort of figure we would call problematic these days. But if de Beauvoir is right, and that was only happening to women back then and not men, instead of elevating women to gender gender equality, stopping them from being the second sex and making equality of the sexes, right? Men obviously being the first sex. This was before, pluralistic gender. But instead of women rising, men have fallen to this horrible state that feminists have been decrying since Mary Wollstonecraft. That's messed up. But it fits, right? Because of who got let through the door. When you've got a bunch of people in management who are self-loathing nerds, they're only going to let in other self-loathing nerds, and you create race to the bottom thought. As opposed to letting in people, trying to pursue more positive, more cheerleading, like, this is great, we're great, this is awesome, like, woo, 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 right? Like, bring the hype. Bring the hype. That doesn't happen in gaming because of all the self-loathing, whereas I won't say other arts because we know that they're all pretty terrible. And again, that there are a lot of self-loathing cycles in those. People don't tend to go into entertainment unless they're looking for someone to love them. And they don't have that in their families of origin, right? But there are other places. I mean, look at the number of women in NASA, right? Like, it is possible. There are better run workplaces than we are seeing in gaming. So how to fix this? The title of the video. Well, first understand it, right? I did my part breaking that cycle of reactive victimhood. I felt punched in the gut. I took it, worked through it. What are they trying to say? Okay, there's something fair here. We got to show examples of that working and then elevate those examples. Ava DuVernay was on news this week telling people to put on their big boy and big girl pants. Gender binary. I'm kidding. But, yeah, do it. And when someone gets it right, elevate that. Because, going back to Beauvoir, if enough people looking at something, if an intent enough focus actually creates, and yes, this is very existentialist, actually creates a version of something based on that subjective view, that subjective gaze, then that thing you can't claim you can't stand, that you're spending all that time raging about, you're feeding that beast. Again, this is just the theory, right? I'm not saying I don't know. This is just what can we do well, let's go back to basics. This fits. Let's follow the theory, right? We have to start creating avatars. We have to do a character creation system based on what we want to elevate, not just keep trying to erase the characters that already exist and start all over again. Like, you never actually get to the game if you don't like that character, don't like that character, don't like that character. Now, the problem is easier said than done, right? Because if you keep feeling like you're kicked in the gut, it's like chipping when you're blocking in a fighting game, right? Eventually, you're going to run out of health. And so we need to create more supportive systems that are, truly inclusive, that isn't all this blame, that actually focuses on restoration and getting people talking to each other. And that's how we'll fix that. This is how we'll fix these issues. That can't happen if we just keep being part of this cycle. And that's not a criticism. Okay, that's me saying we can do this. We're doing this. We're doing this right now. We're having a discussion. So let's keep it up. What kind of content You know, you say, I don't have a problem with anything you're saying. What kind of content would you be okay with that, you know, factoring in the fact that women don't... I'd like comments from you guys addressing this idea that men only want sex, and, you know, whenever men see women that way, they can't think of them any other way. How do we get past this stereotype, right? Because that's the first brick, right? How do we get past that? From you, I'm not a guy, so I don't know. How do we get past that? You tell me. And if you like this sort of conversation, support it. Support what you like. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. I'm really interested in hearing your comments on this. Thanks for watching.